Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stu, and this is Liz. And we're really excited tonight to have two very special friends on this webinar. We have Terri Broughton and Jachym Jerie. And we're going to get them to introduce themselves a bit later. But before we hand over to them, we had a conference about a month ago, 3rd of November, in South Devon, and Terri and Jachym, they were the first two speakers, and they were just amazing. They and we've had such great feedback, and so I'm delighted. We're both delighted that they are the stars of our webinar here tonight.
And the purpose of tonight's webinar is that we're going to talk very much around the area of coaching, and coaching from a principles-based or an inside-out understanding. Because one of the questions we often get asked is around, how do you share the principles as a coach? What does it look like? What's the difference for you as the coach, and what's the difference for your clients as well? So that's the purpose of tonight's webinar.
And I imagine, Terri, that there's going to be some interesting questions about some of the work that you've been doing recently with children. I know that you shared that at the conference, and I know that you've done something since the conference, and I imagine there'll be some interest. I'm certainly interested anyway.
So to start off then, it'd be lovely just to have a very short introduction, and there's probably people that will be joining the call in dribs and drabs. It would be lovely to know a little bit about your background, Jachym and Terri. Jachym, can we start with you? If you could just introduce yourself, what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. So, well, I'm Jachym Jerie. A very unique name, and a blessing and a curse. So what I currently do, I do coaching full time. I start to specialize to work with people who are impact leaders. They are people who may be transitioning out of a job. They might be in a job and they have some kind of vision. They might have their own company or charity. It doesn't really matter, but they want to create something in their life. And I support them with whatever they need at that current time. And so before that, I was doing hypnosis, and that was my background. And I was doing that full time as well. And then I had some insights before I came across the principles, and I realized, well, I want to point people into this new direction instead of doing hypnosis, what I used to do before. And so that's how it kind of came about, that I then found the principles, and I started to learn about it and get immersed by it. And of course, it's impacted me even more. And so nowadays, the work I do is mainly principle based.
Fantastic. And Terri, how about you? Let's hear a bit about your background.
Okay.
And what's brought you here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. You have. So a little bit about me. I was born at a very early age. I didn't go into education until my 30s. Before that, 38 to be precise, before that, I honestly believed that I was not intelligent. I was diagnosed as dyslexic. I sat on the purple table for children that needed extra support. I was a looked after child, lived with lots of different families, not a wholly successful childhood. Early marriage, engaged at 16, married at 18, and had a belief system then that, you know, I would never amount to anything. That was my lot. Had two beautiful children, Amy and Sam, who are 36 and 35 now. And when they went to primary school, I decided, due to circumstances which I won't go into, to take myself off and do an A-level pottery at college, and loved it, and had a little bit of attention about my artistic skills, and took an A-level in art at the same time. and then took something called a BTEC, which came out that year, I think. Had a year out, took myself off to university, got a first class honours degree, took myself then off to do a master's degree, went into education, and have not looked back since. My whole sort of raison d'etre, if you like, is in supporting, well, at that time it was adolescent students to be the very best they could be and have faith in themselves, and that led to something called the Identity Project. And from that point, I started to look into therapies, many therapies, and NLP, trainer, master practitioner and trainer of NLP, several coaching, lots of different coaching courses, ending up doing executive coaching and mentoring. And it wasn't really until I came upon this understanding that something about the way I worked changed. I ended up leading a school, an academy, and I left there 2.5 years ago, just over 2.5 years ago. At that time, I didn't know whether to take a doctorate in coaching. My reason is that I just wanted to support people to be the best they can be. And then I joined a course where I began to gain insight about this understanding that we'll be talking about this evening. So that's me. What I do now is I do some consultancy and some training, lots of coaching, not just inside schools though, outside. And it can be from a CEO of a company to somebody who's struggling with a specific issue. I've got the most amazing clients. And recently I've been involved in something called the Web of Wellbeing, WOW project, working with, of late, 10-year-olds who were struggling with school and sharing this understanding with them. And again, the leadership team and middle leaders in the same school. So that's a kind of brief overview of me.
That's great, Terri. Thank you for that. And I think one of the things that it would be really helpful to understand right at the beginning of this call is for people that maybe are a little bit new or a bit uncertain about the 3 principles. It's also known as the inside out understanding. If we could just give them a little bit of a sense of what do we mean by that? Sort of like what is distinct about the inside out 3 principles understanding? And then it would be lovely then to move on and explore how you share this in your coaching and what the impact is. So, Jachym, are you happy to sort of take that forward? How might you describe the inside out understanding? What is it exactly?
So, of course, the question is, it's always a bit of a challenge when someone asks this question, just because the 3 principles or the inside out understanding is trying to describe something and trying to hint at something that underlying of it is not finite. It's not something that you can just grasp and hold on to like I can hold on to this mug. In essence, what the principles try to describe is how our human experience comes about. And so instead of focusing on the content of the experience, like for example in other kind of coaching styles, you focus on the content and trying to find solutions and all of that. What you look at is actually kind of taking a step back, and you're taking a look at what's creating the experience. And what that does in my experience is that rather than being bogged down by the content and the problems, it kind of frees the person up and they get into kind of a reflective state, which then is much more prone that they can have insights and realizations that presents them with kind of solutions for their life. But in essence, I believe the 3 principles really point back to who we really are at our heart. Well,
I really like that what you say there, Jachym, and what I'm hearing what you're saying is that Traditional coaching maybe would look at the content of what people say, and with the inside out understanding, what we're doing is we're asking people to look before content, to look at what creates the human experience. And I know, Terri, from your work that you've done, really getting to the heart and nub of who people truly are, which is one of the central, I guess, points of my coaching, is something that's really important to you. How do you describe that to clients?
I think I talk a lot about how I first came across this understanding. And I think it's quite important for me to have gone there myself before I take anybody anywhere or describe anything. And I think the first thing that struck me on the course that I was on was the sentence, you're feeling, you're thinking from moment to moment to moment to moment. And in NLP, there's a suggestion of separate realities. But the more I began to realize that we are all creating our experience from moment to moment, is what I speak to the children about. And, you know, I ask them, I might say a word and they make a Play-Doh model of something, but they're all different. Their models are completely different. And it's a very brief, quick way of showing, look, you know, the same information, we're believing something very differently, or we're taking in something very differently about the information that's being given to you at this moment in time. Where else might we do that? I do talk about this diamond inside. I believe 100% that that's in everybody, this innate well-being. I don't think anyone is born broken or in need of fixing. That's for sure. And you know, the funny thing is, when I speak to children about this, they know that. They know that already. It's like, well, you're telling us what we already know. And when I ask them what's inside that diamond, then, you know, the group I've just been working with, we're using words like mighty and love, and just these incredible, empowering words. We talk about how over time we pick up messages from ourselves, things we say to ourselves or from others, or from our own belief systems, or from the television, from the media, from friends, and if they're negative messages, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that that's who we are. I mean, I certainly did. You know, as I say, I didn't go into education until my 30s, so I believed everything that I'd been told, and took it on board hook, line and sinker. I didn't know that there was anything else to see. But when you strip away all that rubbish that has been piled around what I call the diamond inside, when you strip that away, you're left with what Jachym was saying, the kind of innate well-being that's there. I know sometimes when I'm working with the children, I get a £20 note and, you know, spit on it and screw it up and stamp on it. And we keep saying, how much is it worth now? How much is it worth now? And the £20 note never changes its value. And it's like us, you know, whatever has happened to us doesn't change our value. Does that make sense?
That's lovely, Terri. Thank you. It'd be great to go back again and find out a bit more about this project that you're currently working on, Terri. But before we do that, if I can go back to you, Jachym, and just get a sense of how your coaching has changed. You know, perhaps a bit of an insight as to what it was like before and how you see it now.
Oh, I love that question, because I just had a friend over who I haven't seen in a long time. And back when I saw him, I was doing hypnosis. So it's kind of fresh in my mind of how the whole thing has changed. And for me personally, doing hypnosis, I loved it. I mean, I was absolutely fascinated by it. I was like, oh my God, you can stick someone's hand to their chest and they can't move anymore, and you know, and you can do all kinds of cool things. And I was absolutely fascinated by and I love doing it. However, it felt a bit like there was something missing, which prompted me to take time off and to retreat by myself, where I had an insight. And when I look at my work now, while hypnosis was more kind of intervention based, kind of looking at, you know, what's going on, what are the motivations for certain things, is there a secondary gain that they have in the problem which keeps the problem in place, and all of that just falls away in the current coaching. So from the outside it may look very similar, besides that the person maybe doesn't have their eyes closed and their arm floating about, but we're having a conversation really, but inside it's very different, because I don't really have to figure anything out, and I don't have to know anything. I can just relax, because all that gets into a person's way is a misunderstanding. And it's the misunderstanding that our feelings tell us about something other than thought in the moment. That's all. And so it comes always back to that, and just makes it so much simpler and so much more relaxed. And not only that, there's one piece which I found very crucial, and that is how change actually happens. Because, you know, you do your ninja stuff with hypnosis, and then change happens, and you're like, yay, oh my God, this is amazing. But actually what generates change, and I mean change by transformative kind of evolutionary change, is insight. We always change through insight, and that takes the pressure off from having to say anything or analyze anything or any of that, because all I need to do is provide a space that they can have the insights that they need to have in their life. And so it's just a lot more relaxed and calm, and much more impactful, I found. Much more impactful.
So Jachym, I'm curious, what do you mean by insight? What do you mean by that?
Insight is how we have always learned. So let's take, for example, a child that learns to walk. A child that learns to walk has insights about how they can walk. They learn how they don't walk. They fall over, and then they adjust, and they kind of learn. So it's not just an intellectual understanding, it's an embodied understanding. And it's when you see something for yourself that touches you. And when it touches you, it changes you, because the way you see the world is how you act towards the world. And so when that changes on a fundamental level, you're just not going to behave the same way. There's no way. So you can't unsee what you have seen.
So Terri, back to you. I'd love to know more about this project that you started to tell us about at the conference. So it's the project where you're working with, and I know that they were labelled as unteachable kids, but it'd be great for us to hear your experience.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about being touched by an insight, as Jachym was saying, and so I wanted to talk about that, but I'll talk about this and maybe come back to that afterwards. So I've been very involved in something called the Web of Wellbeing, #WOW project, which is a global project for anyone involved in working with youth. So that could be in a school, in a church, outside of school. It could be a granny with their grandchild, but it's looking at taking this understanding to young people, basically anything from, I guess, 5 to 16. And so I've had some experiences. I've been into a school in Norfolk where I live, and so I began to run this project. That was okay. That was sort of 6 one-hour sessions going in and out of a school. Found it really interesting. And a head that I coach in London said, look, can you come and run this project? She said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but we've got 10 boys, and explained the problem with the boys. And so I did get into my thinking a little bit. I just thought, whoever am I? And email came after email. So by the time I went down to London, I just thought, who's going to be sitting in front of me in this room? And I agreed to split the boys into 2 groups. So I had the more active, boisterous group first, 5 boys again. And then the second group was 5 more, I was going to say disengaged, but they are engaged with something, but perhaps not in the teaching and the learning in that moment in that room. And so I had no idea. So I had a whole pile of things that I could have done with the students, but this is very much about seeing what comes up in the moment. So yeah, I had lots of things planned, but I had no idea who these boys would be. And before I even met with them, Stu, there was a warning, a big caveat before I went in the room, like, we're apologising in advance. We don't know, how this is going to be. Don't worry, we'll be in the background. We'll be watching. And some teachers were watching what was going on. Shook their hands. They sat down. I spoke about the project. I spoke about actually little children. Jachym mentioned it, about how, we don't get taught to walk, do we? We just sort of, and it doesn't matter if we fall over, and it doesn't matter if we get bruised, and we just kind of are so in the moment. Doesn't mean we're going to be happy all the time. We cry, we have tantrums, we do feel happy, we feel loved, we don't feel loved, we fall out with our mates, but it's all very much in that moment. It's not about making a decision, oh, that's me then, I'm a non-walker. We just kind of get on with it. So I start to talk to the children about that. That's what I did this time anyway. And we were laughing because I showed them a photograph of a girl who had only half a brain, and she was fluent in 2 languages. And we were saying, well, what, because I had a model of a brain with me, and we were talking about what the brain is responsible for and how it works. And Raha, somebody that came to support me during that time, she was taking photographs and making notes, and she was very helpful, said that she had read something that morning about a girl with 2% of her brain. So then the conversation went on to talk about, well, are we our arms? And so what about people with only one arm? Does that make them more intelligent, less intelligent? Is that who they are, their arms? It's like, well, they're not their arms. Well, are they their legs? So we just went through various bits of the body, the liver, the kidneys, we spoke about transplants. And it was like, oh yeah, well, that's not who we are. Well, that's not who we are then. So that's how the conversation started. And throughout the beginning of the session, I'd got a lot of something called blob cards, emotions on a card. And so the children were holding up emotions about how they felt in that moment. Well, because they're blobs, they mean what they mean to that person at that moment in time. And so I could see the children sort of changing the card that they was picking up from the beginning of the lesson. Oh, this now, oh, this means this. And another student would say, well, no, it means this. And it was a really easy way of talking about how we perceive things to be in the moment. It's like, no, it's this. They got it so quickly. We spoke about teddy bears, and I had a piece of paper which I sort of ripped into a shape of a teddy bear. And I was saying, if this was a piece of cloth, could this piece of cloth make me feel anything? And they were like, no, it's a piece of cloth. Then we had some plastic eyes. Well, can these plastic eyes make me feel anything? No, they're plastic eyes. And we went through sort of various stages of the teddy bear. And it's like, no, it can't make you feel anything. And then I had a teddy bear. And I said, well, can this make us feel something? And there was a kind of pause. And you could see the kind of, well, teddy bears can make you feel something, but not that cloth and not those eyes and not that stitching on the nose. But slowly they were saying, well, actually, that can't make us feel anything. It's our attachment to it, or it's the meaning that we put onto the teddy bear. So we just did lots of very exciting things, Stu. I took in something called a sensor stick, that when you're all connected, and you could be touching somebody's cheek, but as long as you've got both ends of it, it lights up and it makes a noise. And we were talking about connection to others, and how in this instance, it was about working as a team. We need to be connected to each other to make this team work really well. And they got that really quickly. And then I put the sensor stick down. And then throughout the conversation, we were talking about, well, is connection strong here, or is connection weaker here? And interestingly, there's a model which people listening now might be interested in. And I say a model, it's just the way we work. But when we're working with people, it's kind of calibration, find out where people are coming from. So all the time I was trying to work out where these children were coming from. But I do it when I'm working with adults as well, just the same. And then it's about connection. Really, genuinely, I'm not talking about rapport skills. You know, they've got their arms folded, so I think I'll fold my legs or cross my arms or crossover, matching and mirroring. Nothing to do with that. This is about being genuinely in the moment, listening and hearing and connecting to what people are saying. So you've got your calibration and then your connection. And then the third part, if you imagine 3 overlapping circles, the third part is the education. And for me, over time, when I was learning this understanding or finding out about it, I don't know if you really learn it, because I think it's always been there, someone pointing it out to you. But when I was hearing about it, there were 3 circles that were the same size: calibration, connection, education. And I think if I were to redo that diagram, education would be much smaller for me, because I really believe that when you find out where somebody is coming from and you are genuinely connected with them and finding out what comes up in that moment, magic takes place. And thought can change in a millisecond. And I watched these children falling in and out of their thinking. And the second group that came in, I mean, the teachers were very surprised. The boys were engaged, just totally on point. I had them for 2 hours that morning, 4 hours the next day. No, I didn't. I had that group 4 hours in the morning, 2 hours the next day. And then the next group came in for their 2 hours. They were going to have 4 hours. And I remember the teacher saying to me, because I thought, well, I'll just do the same again. And of course, a very different set of boys came in. 5 boys, and they were saying, you'll be lucky if these boys speak to you. You know, it'll be really interesting, and please don't take it personally. And I thought, well, who's going to come in now? And these lads, they came into the room, and I said, who can speak Japanese? I had no idea that that's what was going to come out of my mouth. And they said, well, no, we can't. So they were immediately interacting. So I counted from 1 to 10 in Japanese, and I said, if I told you you'd be counting 1 to 10 in Japanese in the next hour, would you believe me? And they were like, no, not boys like us. Well, of course. But, you know, I said, have you noticed this? And we were drawing pictures and we were doing the actions. Day 2, when they arrived, the first thing they said was konnichiwa. A teacher had obviously taken them to one side to say, hello, how are you? And then I said, so I'm not sure that you learnt anything yesterday. And they were like, no, we've got the Japanese as well as other things. And I said, well, come on then. And one little boy joined the group who was absent. And he spoke 1 to 10 in Japanese with the boys. And I was just about to say his name. It's probably not very wise. And so I said, I noticed that you're counting with the boys, but you weren't in the lesson yesterday and you're speaking Japanese. How is that? Do you speak Japanese? And he said, no. So I said, well, how has this come about? And these other 4 lads had got into school. They'd asked their parents to take them in very early. And they had taught this boy. They'd shown him actions. They'd drawn him pictures. And they taught him before they came into the lesson the next morning so that he could join in. Now, you know, there's no teacher encouraging that or pushing that. They did it because they wanted to. And then during the session that morning, I remember looking over to the lad that I hadn't met the day before. And I was going to say to him, what are you thinking right now? What's going to be my question? and it changed in the moment. And I said, how are you feeling right now? And bearing in mind, these boys were with their peers and there were teachers writing notes and looking on. He just looked me in my eye and he said, I feel loved. Now, I don't know what that sounds like right now on a webinar, but I had a massive lump in my throat for a young boy of 10. And the feeling in that room, if you talk about taking people back to who they really are, the feeling in that room, I could feel it from the staff, from the lady who'd come in to observe what I was doing, from the boys. I mean, they knew it and I knew it. So there's lots, how do I teach? Lots of different ways to engage them, but that's a bit of it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really beautiful, Terri. And I love what you talk about, where it comes to people getting back in touch with who they truly are. That for me is probably the powerful piece of the coaching that I share with people nowadays. So it's the central piece in a way, and I love the way that, you know, those youngsters, they weren't taught that in the traditional teaching and learning way of education. What happens to all of us is that in the absence of that personal thinking, that's what we fall into. So it's great to hear that with children, and I'd love just to pass the question to Jachym as well. That's a way of working with children, and I'd love to know a bit about how you work, particularly with leaders, Jachym. And just before I ask you that question, after your answer, we're actually going to invite questions from our participants, and we really want to make this as interactive as possible. But Jachym, if you would just pick that up, how do you work with leaders and adults? Is it very different, or it's similar to Terri?
Well, I don't really know how exactly Terri works. It's hard to answer. What I do know is that as much as it's simple and the same, also every situation is different and every person is unique. And I guess what is very, very similar is that part with the idea of you have the three circles with the calibration, connection, and the education. And I think that's going on always in my coaching as well, especially the connection part. Because I don't know what it is, but when you get into connection, it's just your whole work becomes easier and things just flow much more natural, and you can bring up topics that might be difficult or that might put someone a bit off in a way, but because you're in this connection, it's coming from a place of care, you can do that. And what I've found is that just people seem to have easier access, I guess, to be pointed back to who they really are, because a place of connection, by definition, is a place of silence. You can't be connected if you have lots of things on your mind. I mean, by connected, I mean the experience of it. If you are in your head and thinking about all kinds of things, you are not really gonna experience the connection as much. And so for people to experience connection, they need to drop out of their head, so to speak. And they fall into this beautiful feeling, to this silence. And it's in the silence that people can see. I mean, it's funny because I just recently had a coaching conversation with one of my clients, and he said, well, I'm afraid of silence, and I think it's dangerous because then I'm going to let my guard down. And I said, well, actually, it's the opposite. Not being silent is dangerous. Because if you look at sports, let's take martial arts, for example. If you're not silent, if you're not present right now, you're going to get punched because you're not going to see the punch coming. When you look at Roger Federer, for example, he apparently said that he has to force himself to look at the scoreboard to see what's going on because he's so present in the moment. So high performance, creativity, the best ideas, they come from this place of silence. That's where the magic is really at. And so in essence, all I try to do is help people to fall more into that space, because that's where change happens. It's in there. Everything comes from that space. And we can find different ways into that, whether it's through looking at the situation, see where they have a misunderstanding, where they believe their feelings are coming from, and then suddenly realizing actually it's not coming from there. That tends that people become silent, because the mind only really fires up when he thinks it has to protect. So we kind of spin in circles trying to get out of a situation. And when we realize, oh, I'm okay, and that feeling is okay, and where I'm at is okay, the mind just naturally quietens down. There's no technique required or anything like that. And so I guess for me, that's the starting point. It's not about talking about the principles. That no one cares about that. It's about finding out, where's the person at? How do they see the world? And what's going on with them? And then just seeing what comes up from there.
Yeah, I love that, Jachym. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many images that occur to me that would be great to have a conversation with you about in relation to sport. For some of our participants, maybe to ask some questions. So I just wonder if anybody does have something that they'd like to ask Terri or Jachym. We can have a look across those that are live and see if anybody's wants to ask a question, or maybe if you could enter it into the chat and then we can come to you. If you can type it in chat, maybe you've got a question that you'd like to ask, that would be very helpful.
We're just going to pause just for 30 seconds whilst you just reflect to see if there's something that might be helpful to ask Jachym or Terri.
Oh wait, there's 2 questions in the chat box. I'd love to hear what Terri has going to say about insight, and then what has been the outcomes for the boys, Terri, and then the third.
So, Erica, I'm going to unmute you, Erica, and you can ask your question yourself. Yeah, Erica, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Terri said that she had something to say about the nature of insight before she was telling the story about the kids. So I was just curious, Terri, if you could remember what it was you were going to say.
Well, really only how my very first insight into this understanding, because I'd been on so many courses, and it's great to go away and glean information and impart it to other people. And I guess I thought that was the kind of course that I was on, Erica. So I'd been into a school and I'd carried out a training in the morning. My training was different to how it'd ever been. You know, my slides from my PowerPoints, I didn't use them all. It didn't seem as important. I was talking to people in the moment, in the room, rather than a sort of fairly rigid script that I got going on in my head. Whilst I would always still answer questions and be as present as I could be, I was often very up in my head. And I think this was the first time I just totally let that go and responded to what was happening in the room at that time. And I told the diamond story with the you know, how we sort of put this dirt around the diamond over time and how we coat it with a layer of varnish because we don't want anyone to see that rubbish that's in there. But all the time it's hiding the diamond. So I was telling the story and teachers were responding to that. And I left and with the head saying, oh, I really need a coach. I didn't even know she meant me because I just left leading a school, and it just didn't occur to me that she meant would I be her coach, which I am to this day. And I was on the train on the way home, and you know how you get a little voice that just sort of asks yourself questions. That's what happened in the carriage on the way home, and so this little voice said, "Well, you've just been talking to these teachers about their diamond. Is it true for you?" was the question. And it hadn't even occurred to me. And so I thought, well, is it true for me? And then I thought, well, it started off was, is what you were saying in that room true? And I thought, well, yeah, that's absolutely true. I believe that to be true. You know, if you cut me open like a stick of rock, it would say that. Yes, that's true. And then the little voice was like, well, is it true for you, Terri? And really, Erica, that had never occurred to me, for everybody else, but not for me. And again, this kind of wisdom, if you like, said, well, if it's not true for you, it's either true or it's not. It's a principle or it isn't. And if it's not true for you, then you've just been speaking a load of rubbish to a lot of people. And it was I guess that's my very first insight of thinking, oh, that means me too. And I remember coming home, sitting in where I am now, looking out onto a garden area and just really noticing the kind of nuances in the green on the leaves, and, you know, everything sort of seemed to come into much sharper focus. And and much less self-critical talk. Sort of almost let myself off the hook for once. And that, I have to say, has just gone on for the last 2.5 years, and with my clients. So that, I think that's what I wanted to talk about when I said about insight. And I really think that when you've seen it for yourself, you can talk to other people with an understanding. I think it's quite difficult because, as Jachym said earlier, you can't hold this in your hand. We turn our thoughts into some sort of form that we kind of think that we can hold in our hands, but they're thoughts, and thoughts come and thoughts go. And I'm not thinking the same as I was yesterday, let alone, like, you know, my thoughts come and they go, and if we let them. But I think what happens is, for some people, we grab onto them, and I certainly had a whole load of thinking that I grabbed onto, that I now see it for what it was.
That's lovely. Now, there's a couple more questions on chat for you, Terri, which we're going to come back to. So Jim asks, are there any techniques or insights into how to get to a point of clarity or quiet from a busy, negative or self-judgmental head? So yeah, Jachym, how do you do it?
Well, so I mean, I'm gonna see if I understand the question or situation correctly, and that probably is that Jim or any person has probably lots of stuff going on in their head, and probably a voice going on that is judging a situation or themselves or anything like that. So I'm going to speak to that. I hope I understood the question correctly. The beauty about the principles is that it's not technique based, it's insight based, and that's a bit difficult at the beginning for lots of people to kind of understand, because let's take this mug. I have this mug and it's broken, and I go and I'm like, well, I'm going to glue it up, right? It's very simple and straightforward. And so we believe that our psychological world is the same, you know, so there's something that needs to be fixed. So I'm going to go and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to find the technique and I'm going to patch it up and it's going to be all great. Well, it's not quite how it works, because psychological problems are a bit like quicksand. So the more you struggle against it, the more it kind of gets hold of you, the more it kind of pulls you in, the more it kind of gets a hold of you. And so when it comes to judgments and negative talk, is often that we believe that they are true, that they actually say something about us. So for example, I can have the thought I'm a loser, which I've had in the past, And at certain points, I freaked out about it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a loser. There's something terribly wrong with me. I got to go and I got to fix it now. Got to find something that's going to straighten this out because there's seriously something wrong here. And you can go from there and you can see, well, hold on a second. That's a thought. That doesn't mean that it's true and valid. And so for a lot of people, it takes a bit of time to realize that, because we mistakenly believe our thoughts to be reality. Well, they're not reality. They're thoughts about us and about things. And so it's not about finding the technique that's going to fix it. It's actually looking at this and realizing it's not real. Realizing it, not just saying to yourself like, yeah, it's not real. No, realizing it. There's no monster under the bed. When you know there's no monster under the bed, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. And so no thought can hurt you. No thought can hurt you. You may believe it can, but it can't.
Great. Thank you, Jachym. And hopefully, Jim, you found that useful. And he's a friend of mine, so we can have further conversations about that at some stage. So there are a couple of other questions that have come up here. There was Jackie Beer, first of all. It's back to you, Terri, and she's particularly interested in outcomes for the boys, or if you can tell us the story thus far.
Yeah, certainly. So the boys have taken their own assembly in this understanding. So, and they've taken it for the whole school. So these are some of the boys that were less engaged, have stood up in front of whole school and taken their own assembly. I went in last week to work with middle and senior leaders, and I asked if I could just meet up, just a 15-minute catch up with the boys. I've got some of their feedback here, so I'll read a little bit of that out in a minute. And anecdotally, the teachers are saying, not all the boys, but they're saying that the boys are more engaged, less drawing attention to self. And I think one boy actually wrote about that. He doesn't feel the need to do that now. I mean, that's only 6 hours worth of being with, and one boy not there for the first morning. So anecdotally, it's looking very good. The staff want to find out more, and I'm thinking maybe we should put some sort of program together. And they're looking at ways of taking this forward now. But I had 15 minutes with the two sets of boys. Now, one of them, the first set, were then going off to play PE or do PE, and had no idea that I was coming to ask them questions. So they certainly weren't prepared. I didn't go over anything that we'd spoken about before. So I was asking them, what did they think of the WOW project? What did they get from it? And these are just their comments. So would it be useful if I read a couple of their comments? I'll do that. Excuse the glasses. So this group called themselves the Helpful Buddies. And I've just put, they were surprised to see me. It was their PE lesson. Keen to show me their ability to count from 1 to 10 in Japanese. Posters from the last meeting were still in the room. We had a learning tree. And so any new understanding, new learning was placed on fruit, apples and things. They were writing it down and placing them on the tree. Anything that they'd been reminded of, they wrote on a leaf and they put that onto the tree. So the tree was in full bloom still in the room. They were sitting with their backs to this. So posters, anything they had their backs to. And it was a room, it wasn't an ordinary classroom. So the first boy that I told you about, who said he felt loved, he reported feeling more calm and focused in his lessons. He loved the way he got to express his feelings during the days of the WOW project. It tells me that his spelling has improved. He says, before I didn't get much of my spelling tests, but now I'm getting a lot more. This has surprised me a lot. Things I can remember. I am wise, powerful, unique. I feel love and I am love. I have a diamond inside. When I let my thoughts settle, I can allow space for some new thoughts to come in, but it's really hard when I'm in the caterpillar soup. There's a whole story that goes with that. Another boy says, I learn new words like optimism and pessimism. The bear does not make me happy. My thinking about the bear can make me happy. We learned about the diamond inside. Learning can feel like caterpillar soup. New thoughts come through if I let my other thoughts go out. How am I asked them all, how are you feeling at this moment? He said, today at this moment, I am feeling happy. This boy says, we made our team rules, no one took over. He's feeling loved. This boy is saying, when the mind settles down, it's like sand settling down in the water. That's the water's natural state. I am powerful, nice, and I'm strong. When we are babies, we are born confident and not with lots of thinking, stopping us doing things. I feel excited about the future. And then
Terri, these are beautiful. And I know there's a couple of comments, just people, we've got 5 minutes. And
sorry, okay. I could talk forever, sorry.
No, this is, well, I know, and it's good. It's so good. I could listen forever. But I want to sort of wrap up. I want people to know how they can get hold of you, Terri, and Jachym, how they can get hold of you too. So just, you know, honing you for reading out a web address or an email address towards the end. And I know there's been a request for the caterpillar soup story, but I've no idea how long that will last or whether that's something we can come back to at another time. But just a couple of questions I know, Terri, about from Jessie and Justine, I think, around activities and where people can get hold of activities or resources that you've been using. Is there a way that people can find out a little bit more about how you work with children, Terri?
Yeah, well, what I would suggest is they log on to the WOW project, the Web of Wellbeing. I don't have the address in front of me, but I'm very happy to paste it underneath when this comes out. So if you click on there, you'll see all sorts of people working with children, not just the way I do. And so you'll get lots of resources, ideas, you'll be pointed in lots of directions. So please do feel free to log into there. And I'm, you know, if someone drops me an email, I'm more than happy to share and have a conversation.
And in fact, Justine's just popped up webofwellbeing.org in a chat
bless
box.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, of what that is. And we will post that. Make sure we post that when we post the recording of this. So, Jachym, have you got anything that you would like just to sum up with and also just let us know how we can get hold of you or how people can get hold of you in future?
Sure. How you can get a hold of me is on my website, jachymjerie.com. My name is spelled Jachym, Jerie.com. And otherwise, well, I can, if you have ever thought about exploring this more, I can really recommend it. It has improved my life greatly, and it has improved my work greatly, and the impact I have with clients. So this is really worthwhile. It's not just a bunch of mirrored smokes.
That's great, Jachym. Jachym Jerie, spelt one way, pronounced several ways. But we're doing our best. Trust me. And Terri, any final words from you, and also how people might get hold of you?
I'd love to tell the caterpillar story, but that's maybe for another time. I think that this understanding is really drawing out what's already innate within all of us, and we're not always aware, and I see that as my role, whether it's with children or with adults, regardless of jobs and titles, and just regardless. That's what this is about. How can you get hold of me? Probably better at my email address, which is Terri with an I, TERRI, Broughton, BROUGHTON, associates @gmail.com.
That's great. And the videos from the conference. Both Jachym and Terri were speaking at the Coaching Connect conference in November. The videos are just about 15 minutes long, really good quality talks. And we'll make sure that those links are also posted when we put this recording out. So we'll certainly do that. And if you're interested in finding out more about the 3 principles or the inside out understanding, then Stu and I at Coaching Connect, we're really good at signposting you to different people. We know a lot of people, a lot of coaches who are involved in the 3 principles and inside out understanding. And if we don't know the answer, we sure know somebody who will. So please do feel free to get hold of us too at coachingconnect.co.uk. So we're going to bring, what I'm going to suggest, Terri, is that we're going to bring this meeting to a close. You hang on, and anybody else who wants to hang on to hear Caterpillar Soup. But I will record that separately as well. So if you need to leave, please leave, but I'll make sure that that's recorded as well, so you can hear the Caterpillar Soup story as well, because I'm intrigued now, and it sounds interesting. So in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. This particular webinar is coming to a close. And I'm going to stop the recording in a second, but then we'll start it up again for Caterpillar Soup. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you all.
Thank you very much.